Hello, everybody. We're going to get started in just a moment. For those of you in the back, please do come up. We have plenty of seats up front. Thank you.
Hello. Hello, everyone. My name's Timothy Wilcox. I'm from DRR, based in the Bangkok office. Thanks very much for coming. This is a wonderful turnout. It's great to have so many... Can you hear me? No. They can't hear me. All right. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yep, okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Sorry, we've had some IT difficulties and I'm just talking to the interpreters there. So my name is Timothy Wilcox. I'm from DRR. It's not on. Okay. All right. Yeah, hello, testing. So everything was working for the previous session, but as an emergency manager, myself, I have to be prepared for all contingencies. Yes, I will quickly learn 6 UN official languages very quickly. No, but seriously, while they're just fixing that interesting fun fact, the UN actually has 8 levels for English, and the worst one, the one you have to know the most, that's the hardest, level 8, is actually Australian, believe it or not. And that's what I am. So I will attempt to speak English more clearly for people. But just check, is everything okay for interpretation? So, okay. Okay. All right, well, okay. In the interest of time, hopefully the IT people can resolve and I will move forward. Again, my name is Timothy Wilcox. I'm from DRR Bangkok office, and I lead the Sendai Framework Monitoring team in Asia Pacific. And thank you very much for coming. It's a wonderful turnout. I see we have standing room only here. One of our panelists may be speaking Spanish at some stage, so if you would like a headset for interpretation, please do grab one. I will also point out that we have a survey of questions from the audience on the app. So if you go to the session on the app, you can actually enter your questions that you would like to ask the panelists, and we will be passing those questions on to the moderator for our questions and answers session. So the survey should be open now on the app for this session, so please do feel free to type in your questions as they come to you. On that note, I'd like to introduce our moderator for the session. It's Ms. Marcy Roth, who's Chief Executive Officer for Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies. Ms. Marcy is a global rights disability leader, and she's also an emergency management expert, and was actually appointed to FEMA in the USA by President Obama. So we're very honored to have her here, and she's also leading us, UNDRR, on making sure that the conference is universal and disability accessible. So we thank her for her efforts. On that note, I shall pass on to Marcy, who speaks American English. So you should be able to understand her. And I'll hand over to you, Marcy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you for joining Working Session 1, the Sendai Framework Implementation. I'm very proud to be moderating this session as a disabled woman, as a member of the thematic group on disability inclusive disaster risk reduction, and as the CEO of the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies, which is a disabled persons organization with a single focus on the rights and needs of the 1 billion persons with disabilities across the globe. We focus before, during, and after disasters. The purpose of this session is to examine global progress in implementing the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction and identifying practical actions and recommendations to accelerate implementation. The session will do this through looking at implementation progress to date from the perspective of a developed and a developing country, civil society, and the private sector, as well as use of the Sendai Monitor. It will highlight linkages between Sendai implementation and other 2030 Sustainable Agenda frameworks, in particular the SDGs. As you already heard, we will be using the app for posing questions. We are taking this for a good run this afternoon. I know there are many people in the audience who may, for accessibility purposes, need to find whether or not the app works for their particular disability or their particular accessibility need. And so we may be taking questions separately from the app. We're going to look to those of you using it to discover whether it's accessible to all. Now I'd like to introduce our very formidable panel. I think you're all going to have a great opportunity to hear from some of the world's experts on issues around the implementation of the Sendai framework. I'll begin with Mr. Ricardo Mena, who is the Chief of Supporting and Monitoring the Sendai Framework Implementation Branch for UNDRR. Shri Kamal Kishore, member of the National Disaster Management Authority for the Government of India. Ms. Martha Herrera Gonzalez, who is the Global Director of Corporate Social Responsibility for CEMEX. Ms. Maria Veronica Bastillas, Latin America and Caribbean Development Coordinator for the Global Network of Civil Society Organizations for Disaster Risk Reduction. And Mr. Mohammed Hassan Felfo, Abdel Samea, who is with the government of Egypt. And we will start with Ricardo Mena, who will be providing a global overview.
Thank you very much, Marcy, and good afternoon to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished members of the panel. I'm going to make a presentation on the Sendai Framework Monitor, which is the tool that we were asked by the open-ended intergovernmental expert working group to develop, to put at the disposal of member states to report back on the implementation of the Sendai Framework global targets and indicators. So just to start by indicating you what is the current situation in terms of numbers of countries reporting using this monitoring tool, and also how we are doing in terms of each one of the global targets of the Sendai Framework. So as of the end of last week, actually, and this figure only shows the data for 2017, we actually have around 116 countries that are in one way or another using the monitor to report back on implementation. Here for year 2017, actually we have 102 countries that have been reporting for that specific year. Just a parenthesis, as you know, countries have to also provide data for the baseline period, which is the decade from 2005 to 2015. So actually countries are filling gradually the data for each one of the years they have to report on. As you can see, target A is the one that has the biggest number of countries reporting on, followed by target E and target B and C. Targets D, F, and G are the ones that are being least reported on by member states. Now, this tool is available only since 14 months ago. So we are at the very, let's say, early stages of implementation of this tool, and governments have gone through a very steep learning curve on not only how to use the monitor, but also on how to gather the data that is required to report back on each one of the targets and indicators. But this graph shows you a progression of how we are progressing in terms of the numbers of countries that are using the monitor. So the smallest bar shows you what was the situation just 1 month after we provided the tool, after we made it available. We had 24 countries using it. By November 2018, when we made actually the first snapshot to use the data available on the Sendai Framework Monitor for developing the global assessment report that we just launched earlier today, we had already 80 countries. Then in April, when we had another snapshot of data taken to report back on the implementation of the DRR-related indicators of the Sustainable Development Goals, we had already 110 countries, and as of last week, we had, as I said, 116. So you can clearly see that the interest and engagement of countries in reporting using the Sendai Framework Monitor is growing gradually. Also, in terms of active users by region, as you can see, we have already close to 1,000 users that have access being granted to them to report on one or many of the indicators. Now, the number of people that are given access in each one of the regions does not necessarily reflect which region is actually having the biggest number of countries reporting and using the Sendai Framework Monitor. Actually, Europe and Asia are the countries that are, proportionally speaking, biggest number of countries in those regions using the Sendai Framework Monitor. But this is important because it also shows how open national governments and national Sendai Framework Focal Point and coordinators of the Sendai Framework Monitor are providing access to all these other organizations, line ministries, and other stakeholders to contribute to the data that is finally being presented on the monitor. Here you can see actually there are 4 main categories of potential users of the system. You have the national coordinators that are actually the ones that provide access to others, and you have also contributors and validators and observers. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the validators later on, because we have seen, and this is one of the challenges that you will see at the end of my presentation, a lot of countries are using the monitor, are putting data in, but are not validating it. And this is very important, because if data is not validated, it's not being used on the statistics and the module that actually provides you the analysis of the data that is in the Sendai framework monitor. Now, in terms of progress made, I'm going to go very quickly, target by target, to show you what we have found. And this is actually, and I have to also make here a clarification, because some of the data that I have been providing to you is data based on figures as of last week, but now when we go through the status of the individual targets, I'm actually going to go to the data that's available on the Global Risk Assessment Report, the GAR 2019, which was actually developed based on a snapshot on the data that was available by the end of October 2018. So, in terms of mortality, there is a confirmed long-term decline in fatalities relative to population size. And there you can see also on the circle the hazard distribution of mortality. And this includes data actually from 1997 to 2017. We can see clearly that tsunami, cyclone, and earthquakes and floods are actually on the top list of the hazards that have been causing the greatest number of mortality. And on the bottom graph, you actually have a graph indicating the number of deaths per 100,000 inhabitants in lower middle income, upper middle income, and high income countries and small island developing states. And there you can see that there is a big disparity. I mean, there is a big gap. People being killed by disasters in high income and upper middle income countries are really a fraction of those that are being killed in lower middle and low income countries. And you can see also that seeds are being disproportionately affected on this specific target. So quickly on target B, people affected, you can see their data also for the last 15 years from 2000 to 2015. And you can see that the curve actually tends to continue growing. So we are actually managing to lower number of people killed. And I think that Kamal will refer to a very good example of how India has managed to lower the number of fatalities due to hazards. I'm not going to dwell on that. But generally speaking, in general terms, the number of people affected seems to be still growing. Now, in terms of direct economic losses, I'm not going to enter into detail into these graphs, but we can clearly see that actually the distribution of disaster occurrences and impact by region show clearly that Asia and Africa perhaps are the regions that are predominantly being more affected by the occurrence of events. But if you look at the distribution of disaster occurrence and impact by income group, then you will see again that the percentage of impact in low middle income countries and low income countries actually accounts for the majority of losses. So inequality, poverty as the big drivers of risk are actually determinant in terms of how much people are actually affected economically by disasters. As many of you know, there are many World Bank reports actually coinciding with this data. There are 26 million or so people pushed into poverty every year by disasters, and the actual economic losses are much, much bigger than what we have usually heard about from the insurance industry in particular. So in terms of target D, as I said, this is one of the targets where we have the least number of countries reporting on. So there is difficult for us to jump into conclusions, but based on these curves from data from 2000 to 2015 again, you can see that at least in the past 2-3 years, the losses on critical infrastructure and public services have been going down apparently. Now, this can be a bit misleading because sometimes there are a number of years which actually have less occurrences of very intensive events, which are the ones that create more impact in this particular sector. And then on target E, the progress on disaster risk reduction strategies for 2020, remember that this is the target that has a deadline by 2020, so there is a bit of urgency in terms of countries actually meeting this target. Now, from countries that are reporting on this specific target, we can see that on average, countries are self-assessing themselves as meeting 60%, let's say, of the best mark possible. The best mark is 1, and if a country has 1, that means that for all the 10 key elements that we have defined as the elements to be taken into account to decide whether a risk, a DRR strategy is or not fully aligned with Sendai framework, you would get a 1. So here countries are saying, you know, we are getting there, we are not yet there, but progress is being made. And we really hope that in this next year until 2020, we will not only have more countries reporting on target E, but countries will also be looking into the evolution and going back to their strategies to improve them and put them up to date and well aligned with the Sendai framework. On target F, definitely too early for conclusions, but what I would like to emphasize on this graph is that actually the amount of funding that is being allocated for DRR, which is the very thin dark blue line in the bottom, is marginal as compared to other flows of overseas development assistance that is going particularly for humanitarian crisis and emergency relief. So this is a striking reality that we still live with it. Finally, on progress on target G, also it's interesting, but if you compare the different years that countries are reporting on, for example, 2015, 2016, 2017, actually you see that the bars are going down. Now, that doesn't mean that things are actually not improving. It just means that as more countries report and they assess themselves as not really having fully multi-hazard early warning systems and risk assessment and risk information, that amount is going to fluctuate a bit. But definitely lots of progress still need to be made in terms of fulfilling target G. Now, I'm going to skip this one because of time, but I'm going to just, with the indulgence of our moderator, just go quickly through a few elements of what we believe are the challenges and trends in reporting. First, we have heard from countries that data is scattered among various organizations and entities, and sometimes it's very difficult for the coordinating institution to actually collect the data and have it available. There is also difficulty in accessing data. Sometimes, you know, we defend our data and we don't share it, even if it's between government agencies. So this is, of course, something that we would pretty much suggest to overcome. There is very limited disaggregated data on, you know, gender, age, disability, etc. Very few countries are being able to actually report on disaggregated data. Data validation is an issue. I referred to the validators in the Sendai Framework Monitor, and this is something that we still need to work with countries to make sure that, you know, that they do go ahead and validate the data so that it actually can show on the analytics. There are also gaps in data collection and in data reporting, particularly in some of the targets. And we can also pick up some errors in the data entry or in actually the interpretation to the guidance and the minimum data standards that we have provided through our technical guidance notes to member states. And finally, disaster loss databases are definitely seen as an indispensable tool for reporting, particularly on targets A to D. So early moments, only 14 months into the use of the Sendai Framework Monitor, a lot of progress made, but of course, lots still to be done. So with this, I end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. I think this was extremely important data to report on, and clearly we have our work cut out for us, but important to measure what we treasure and then treasure what we measure. So thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Shri Kamal Kishore from the Government of India.
Actually, Shri is an honorific, so my name is Kamal Kishore. You can call me Shri if you want. That would be a nice change. Thank you, Ricardo, for that very nice overview of what's happening with regards to the implementation of Sendai framework and the reporting on it. I will just point out a few things, but before that, 4 years are already over, so nearly 30% of the time frame of the framework is over. So we have it's only an 11-year framework. So at this juncture, what are some of the impressions we can see with regards to the results we are getting, not at an aggregate level, but in a few countries? So there are 5 key things that I would like to highlight. Some of the comments I will make will be somewhat discordant to the conventional narrative and conventional advocacy for approaches to reducing losses. My first observation is that it appears that out of the 7 targets, we have a reasonably good chance of achieving those targets under A, mortality, E, plans and strategies, F, international cooperation, G, access to early warning. So it seems that, the initial signs are encouraging. In my own country, at least for 2 principal hydrometeorological hazards, cyclones, we've talked about cyclones a lot today, but also heat waves, which are a major killer. In 2015, 2,000 people to this year in 2 digits, low 2 digits, and consistent. And one can talk about what has worked and what remains to be done in that context. There are colleagues here in the audience from India who are working in a very focused way on reducing deaths from lightning strikes. There also we can hope to achieve the results. So that's the first thing that, except target B, C, D, it seems that we will achieve, we have a reasonable chance of achieving the targets by 2030. Having said that, there is something which this progress is masking, which is that when we have tried really hard to reduce mortality, the sort of advocated approach that take a multi-hazard approach, look at all risks, systemic risks. If you want to achieve results very quickly, sometimes you really have to wonder whether that's the way to go about it. So, if we have to do something about reducing mortality from cyclone, we have to go after it with a single-minded focus that these are the 10 things we have to do, and that will reduce mortality. If we have to do it about heat wave, that's what we have to do. So the point I'm making is that we cannot completely dismiss, as opposed to the conventional wisdom of always taking a multi-hazard approach, the value of sometimes, not always, sometimes going after a single hazard and taking very concrete actions. This is particularly true for extensive risk, where we can do this. I think this is, it's really not acceptable that people should be losing lives through heat waves in 21st century. So, and that we know what needs to be done for that, and we should do that. So that's my second point, that, extensive risk versus intensive risk, single hazard versus multiple hazards. My third point is that with a lot of enthusiasm, we negotiated the Sendai framework and make big commitments to targets under B, C, and D. The number of affected, of course, is connected to C and D, economic losses and infrastructure losses. But by definition, these losses arise from long-term development processes. And those long-term processes cannot be, their direction cannot be changed overnight. So the actions we will take today, if we completely change the way we are shaping our built environment today, its results will be apparent in 10, 15, 20 years. So my submission here is that if we do not show visible losses, a visible reduction in economic losses, infrastructure losses, that would not mean that we are not making progress. We are putting the building blocks in place. It will deliver results after 2030. So I think that is an important point. I have to go back to the indicator framework and see whether indicator framework has the provision to capture that. So, in aggregate, you may not be meeting the targets, but you're actually doing the right things. And by not 2030, by 2035, you will see reduction in losses. In some cases, you will see the results as well. That's my third point. My fourth point is specifically with regards to E. There is some sort of a planning and strategy development frenzy to meet the target. And at the same time, there are in different sectors on different things, very good strategies being developed. But perhaps we are not counting them. So I think we have to have a slightly broader definition of what counts as a strategy for loss reduction. And I think we should cast the net a little bit wider while counting what is the strategies. Again, we'll have to see how the indicator framework captures that. And my fifth and final point is a somewhat sensitive point, is that it is especially true for large countries like mine, where each state is bigger than many countries of the world. So to do a meaningful job of reporting on progress, we need to set up a very comprehensive reporting infrastructure at all levels. That takes time in order for it to be meaningful. The purpose of any capture of data is not just to report for Sendai framework, but to make changes at home. And that brings me to the point that we have to develop systems for capturing data which yield immediate benefits in terms of how do we use that for better decision making in terms of allocation of resources for immediate response, recovery, risk reduction, etc. It cannot be its single purpose cannot be to report against Sendai and look at long-term trends. So, but reconciling these two, that you sort of set up a system which actually helps you allocate or make a rational allocation of, say, in India's case, National Disaster Response Fund or State Disaster Response Funds, District Disaster Response Funds. But at the same time, it gives you valuable information to look at how we are progressing in terms of loss reduction. With these 5 points, I rest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kamal. This is exciting.
Shri.
I'm so confused. Thank you very much, sir. We really appreciate hearing from a country that's making such significant progress, both in terms of what you're learning from the data and also the observations that you're making about what we all can learn from as we move forward. I will now turn to our next speaker, Mr. Mohammed Hassan Felfo Abdel Samea from the government of Egypt.
Thank you. First, please allow me to express my profound gratitude and sincere appreciation for having been granted this opportunity to present in minutes the Egyptian experience in the area of disaster risk reduction and the Sendai framework implementation. I'm going to quickly through my presentation. First, Egypt is subject to different kinds of disaster risks, such as those resulting from natural hazards, man-made hazards, and also the climate change threats. Those threats are fueled by growing population and rising associated demand, coupled with those the constraint of a finite resource base. Excuse me, is the presentation is working or no? Okay. Yes. This is a very quick country profile about Egypt. Is about more 1 million square kilometers. The population is over 104 million. The administrative units are 27 governorates. These are the types of disaster that are the most affecting among different types of natural hazards in Egypt, including flash floods, earthquakes and drought, and heat waves and storms. Also, these are the most common types of man-made hazards. Here we can see a number of natural hazards by major category during the period from 1990 to 2018, showing that the most frequent are climate-related disasters or hazards. Also, this one, according to number of deaths in the same period, we can notice that the great presence of climate-related hazards. Again, by a number of affected people, the same notice. This graph shows how the economic losses of the disasters are increasing with great effect on development gains. Here to show some of the main steps that we took to moving forward ahead Sendai framework implementation in Egypt. Egypt has participated actively in the process of formulating indicators of progress of Sendai framework through participation in the open-ended intergovernmental expert working group on indicators and terminology relating to disaster risk reduction. The Egyptian National Platform for DRR has developed a roadmap that aims to provide guidance and highlight a number of areas of focus to implement the Sendai framework, emerging from the review of Hugo framework implementation. The roadmap takes into consideration what has been achieved and aims to complement within the Egyptian sustainable, what are planned within the Egyptian Sustainable Development Strategy, Egypt's Vision 2030, and integrating DRR considerations into sustainable development strategy on different levels and sectors. One of the many steps that Egypt has updated its national DRR strategy. This is aligned with the Sendai framework and was followed by an action plan for implementation. We also increased in the number of local level strategies for DRR according to the Global Target E of the Sendai framework. And up to date, we have more than 66% of Egyptian governorates have their own local strategies and plans for disaster risk reduction. We also reformulated the national platform for DRR to strengthen its mandates and roles as a multi-stakeholder national mechanism that serves as an advocate for DRR at different levels and helps in the integration of DRR in different sectors. The new formulation focused on enhancing operationalization of state accountability for DRR. Also, we have finished reviewing and updating number of national disaster risk management plans, which specify tasks to be performed by ministries and governorates. Also, we recognized the importance of partnership with private sector and NGOs. So we are building a public-private partnership in the area of the DRR through joint cooperation and efforts between the governmental sector and the private sector for reducing risks of flash floods through investment in DRR to improve resilience of specific prone areas. We have an example of the Red Sea Governorate, Red Sea area, and the coastal zone of the economic area in the Gulf of Suez. These are two examples, good examples for partnership between public and private sector in this area. Also, we are working with the telecommunication operators to enhance our early warning system to enhance the ability of disseminating alerts to public. Also, in this regard of international cooperation, we are implementing different projects for strengthening disaster risk management in Egypt in cooperation with the GFDRR and the WFP. That paves the way for further collaboration and synergies focusing on prevention and preparedness rather than response. Conducting a number of activities within a national campaign for raising public awareness in the area of DRR with a special focus on school and universities. And in this regard, I would like to mention the campaign that started in 2018 and continues for the second year in 2019 that targeted raising awareness for more than 20 million student schools in more than 26,000 schools in Egypt. Also developing practices for enhancement of the Build Back Better concept, reconstruction and recovery activities in the affected areas of flash floods. In 2015 and 2016, these areas have experienced heavy rainfalls and flash floods, and these areas, after a contamination of the disaster there, the recovery and reconstruction activities are good example in this regard, as it was an opportunity for streaming and promoting risk reduction and building resilience supported by high levels of political commitment. Finally, I would like to say that all these measures are reflected positively on reducing risks and consequently reducing their negative impacts on the Egyptian community. Also, I would like to mention that Egypt is making a good progress in terms of reporting on the Sendai framework monitoring, and we have completed the reporting for the targets from A to E, and we are also working for the other targets to be completed soon. My concluding notes that are the national platform for DRR is an important tool for enhancing coordination among different stakeholders. To coordinate and involve a wide range of ministries and agencies in the Sendai framework monitoring system is not an easy task, but not an impossible one. Disaggregation options are rather complex and impose more difficulty for reporting as some data are not available. Some of them are not available at all, or some of them lacks minimum required levels of quality. So we hope we can learn from other experiences to facilitate the disaggregation options on our data. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and we Yani we look forward for more cooperation with our regional office for Arab states. That I would like to thank them very much for giving continuous support for Egyptian government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. I think these practical examples of your implementation are great examples for others who may not be that far along yet. And also you're noting the importance of collaboration, I think is a lesson for all of us to keep in mind. Our next speaker is Martha Herrera from CEMEX. Turn to Martha.
Thank you, Marcy. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here representing CEMEX and, of course, the private sector. And I would like to give a quick overview of what we are and why are we doing this and some of our most recent examples. For those of you who don't know CEMEX is a Mexican company that has 110 years old. And it's Mexican-based, but it's going global since 30 years ago. We are a building solutions company around the world. We are present in 50 countries. We have a clear purpose, which is building a better future, so it's very related to our core business. And in the last 2 years, we have a very specific strategy, which is building a stronger CEMEX. And as we say, this also means building stronger cities and communities, which is also very core related. In the CEMEX business strategy, I want to give you this information because I wanted to tell you that this is very close related to our own strategy. This is not something that we keep it parallel to our business. It's core business, it's inside our own strategy. So in the own sustainability model, which has 4 pillars, you can see in the economic part, we provide resilient infrastructure and energy efficient construction solutions. In the environmental part, we also generate low carbon industry and efficient use for resources. In the social part, we are implementing a high social impact strategy to empower resilient communities, etc. And it's embedded in our own values. And for that, we have 13 priorities that you can follow up in our own integrated report, which have own goals for the 2030. And regarding communities, which is a big part of the strategy, we aim to improve the quality of life and well-being of our employees and the communities in which we operate. We operate in around 5,000 communities around the world, so we are very focused on education, on sustainable and resilient infrastructural mobility, in promoting entrepreneurship, and in promoting health and safety and a culture of environmental protection. That's our focus. So you can see that resilience is a key factor to this transformational and sustainable business model that we have. So it's embedded. Why we do this? Because besides it's a responsible thing to do, it makes business sense. And it's very important for us. First of all, in health and safety, this past year we achieved for the first time 0 fatalities in our company. And we would like to also achieve that in our supply chain and in our own community. So this is a very important focus for us. Cultural speaking, this is very well embedded in our culture. It's a key driver to be monitoring the risks for natural hazards and solutions to reducing risks. It's very well embedded in our strategy planning with a long-term view in not only inside the company but also in our projects. And we like to be always anticipating and adjusting. It makes business sense also in terms of cost and reducing cost and savings. We are very much focus on innovation and technology. We are in a digital transformation, so everything that we do is focusing right now on digital, and we have created a digital hub in Monterrey. Some of the things that we're doing are also focusing on resilience. And we have 2 labs, one in Switzerland and the other in Mexico, dedicated for resilient and sustainable, the designing and implementing resilient and sustainable products and solutions. We also are very dedicated to build trust, so we do and conduct a lot of deep dialogues with community and stakeholder to integrate their social expectations into our own business strategy. So with all this, we have a very proactive and strategic resilience strategy to raise awareness, to share expertise and knowledge, to generate innovation and collaboration with our stakeholders, with the government, with the NGOs, with universities, to develop tangible projects, to measure our progress and impact, and of course, to communicate. Climate change, as we know it, is not a risk, it's a reality. In the last 2 years, in some of our operations, we have very important disasters in the USA, in Florida, in Mexico with the earthquakes, in Puerto Rico with Hurricane Maria, in Trinidad and Tobago with the floods, in Philippines with a massive landslide that we suffered very near our operation, in Guatemala with the Volcán de Fuego. So how are we doing this? How are we implementing? We have a very human strategic strategy, and we develop a business model, share value business models, and a lot of models with circular economy. We like to be focusing on risk and challenges to turn them into business opportunities. And we do that by having prioritized the SDGs in which we have been focusing, and of course in the Sendai framework. So both frameworks are very important in our business strategy. What are we doing? We want to do something great for the people and for the planet, so we have been developing these business models specifically, for example, for housing models. It's called Housing for All, and not only within the disaster or after the disaster, but before. And we help communities. We have been working with almost 3 million people right now to build the new homes that are resilient. We are in the product innovation also, developing constantly new products for resilient purposes. Emissions, specifically, for example, this in our cement plant in Egypt, we are developing new kinds of products for less carbon emissions. Alternative fuels, we are reducing waste generation and with share value and circular economy models. Urban infrastructure, sustainable and resilient urban infrastructure, we have right now around 1,000 of these projects around the world. We have been developing urban community transformation models. This is something that we did in Mexico, but we are translating that into vulnerable areas around urban communities and rural too. We have a very important risk management operation around our operations, and we are very focused on social impact in vulnerable communities for building resilience with collaboration among sectors, building awareness and education with innovation and investing resources. One of the best things that we are doing right now is partnerships with local governments, with national governments, with NGOs, with international organizations to do that. One very important organization is ARISE, which is a voluntary alliance we have with the private sector together with UNDRR to really work very proactively on develop resilient societies. We have more than 12 networks around the world, and we would like to work together with governments, with universities. We will have an event from ARISE Mexico in Mexico, so you are all invited to join. So for us, resilience is always a plus. So thank you very much for listening. I will be very open for questions. Thank you.
Very good job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martha. It's wonderful to hear the private sector's participation, and the examples that you shared, I think, are important for all of us to see what one company across the globe is doing as contributors to this very important effort. And our final speaker will be Ms. Maria Veronica Bastias, who is from the Global Network for Disaster Reduction, and I will turn to you.
Thank you very much, Marcy. Bien, permítanme antes de comenzar decirles que vengo de una red mundial de organizaciones de la sociedad civil, ya sea a nivel individual como también redes. Tenemos alrededor de 900, yo diría un poco más, aumentamos cada día 900 miembros y estamos presentes en más de 140 países alrededor del mundo. Somos la red global más amplia enfocada en reducción de riesgo de desastre. Nació en el año 1997 con el objeto de poner las voces de las comunidades mayormente expuestas a riesgo en los escenarios de discusión de la temática, es decir, en las plataformas globales y las plataformas regionales. ¿Me presta él? Bien, dicho esto, no sé, aquí. Bien, Sendai nos convocó a los grupos y actores a definir nuestros roles. Y en el caso de la sociedad civil, nosotros consideramos que tenemos una relación privilegiada, que tenemos una característica única en el sentido de esta relación con las comunidades mayormente expuestas a riesgo. Muchas organizaciones de la sociedad civil trabajan tanto en el ámbito del desarrollo, adaptación al cambio climático, distintas temáticas, justamente tratando de erradicar la pobreza, reducir vulnerabilidades, reducir riesgo, fortalecer la resiliencia. Y en ese sentido también nosotros trabajamos generando confianza con las comunidades. Por lo tanto, tenemos una base de sustentación que puede ser aprovechada para trabajar en la reducción de riesgo de desastre. Y estos son, respondiendo al marco de Sendai, estos son los roles esenciales que la GNDR identificó entonces respecto de el valor agregado que nosotros podemos dar a las iniciativas que desarrollan los estados nacionales. Somos conector, conectamos actores, sectores, territorios, comunidades, construimos capacidades, somos implementadores de proyectos, como les decía, generamos también conocimiento desde la práctica y somos capaces de también diseñar e implementar mecanismos de monitoreo. Por supuesto, también nos preparamos para la abogacía para generar cambios en las comunidades mayormente expuestas a riesgo. Y entonces llegamos con este paquete de capacidades identificados desde nuestra experticia, desde la posibilidad de entregar este valor agregado a la implementación del marco de Sendai, y salimos ya en la plataforma del 2017 en México con un gran desafío. ¿Cuál fue el desafío que nos generaba las reflexiones que allí se dieron? Que teníamos la necesidad, primero, de acelerar la implementación del marco de Sendai. Necesitábamos para ello que armonizar la Agenda 2030, y esto significaba, por cierto, que ya no podemos seguir trabajando en silos, sino que tenemos que conectarnos. Y tenemos que conectarnos en varios niveles. Tenemos que conectar no solo el trabajo dentro de las agendas que se da a través de sus expresiones a nivel nacional y a nivel local, pero también tenemos que apoyar la conexión de los sectores. Necesitamos una mirada integrativa y entonces llegamos hoy día a Ginebra con esa tarea en cómo vamos a acelerar la implementación del marco de Sendai, y hemos escuchado en esta mesa el diagnóstico que nos da Ricardo respecto de la información que nos está dando el monitor de Sendai y también iniciativas muy interesantes de distintos actores. Entonces, ¿qué significa armonizar la Agenda 2030? Significa también para nosotros una convocatoria a la colaboración, una gran convocatoria a la colaboración que creemos que es muy importante romper los silos a todo nivel y también ir ya avanzando más directamente en lo que ya yo creo que estamos todos de acuerdo y no hay mucha discusión en la vinculación y el nexo que hay entre reducción de riesgo de desastre y desarrollo sostenible. Entonces, hoy día en la mañana todos tuvimos la oportunidad de escuchar a la representante del Banco Mundial que nos decía al final de su discurso, ya no es tiempo de más palabras, sino que es el tiempo de más acciones. Pero estas acciones también requieren una planificación. Y yo creo que nosotros desde la sociedad civil hemos ido avanzando en esta necesidad de colaborar. Justamente en esta plataforma tuvimos 2 días de trabajo de distintos actores. Y entonces tuvimos el foro multiactores, en donde hubo una reflexión muy rica y también compromisos y de cómo aumentar este nivel de colaboración y cómo nosotros nos comprometemos a acercarnos al sector privado, así como nos acercamos entre las diversas organizaciones de la sociedad civil. Necesitamos conectarnos con el sector privado, necesitamos trabajar con el Estado y nosotros desde la red global hemos ido trabajando también para aportar insumos desde nuestra vereda para las iniciativas de los estados. Hemos trabajado en levantar casos, experiencias que nos hablen de la gestión comunitaria sustentable para su institucionalización. Estamos generando aprendizaje a partir de ello y es abierta. Toda esta información se comparte a través de nuestra página web y es de muy fácil acceso. Pero también estamos trabajando en levantar casos. ¿Para qué significa el trabajar la coherencia de las agendas? Y también tenemos casos que los invitamos, más tarde les voy a dar el dato de cómo pueden acceder a ello. Pero como tengo pocos minutos, les quiero ahora hablar de una iniciativa concreta que es por la cual nosotros nacimos, que es la visión de primera línea. Y les voy a hablar de la visión de primera línea de 2019, porque escuchando los desafíos que mencionaba Ricardo, creo que podría ser de mucha utilidad una herramienta que hemos desarrollado también en esta versión 2019, desde la experiencia, desde el año 2017. Entonces, hoy día es una herramienta que moviliza a centenares de organizaciones de la sociedad civil en 50 países. En las distintas regiones. Es una herramienta que se aplica, como lo pueden leer ahí, a las organizaciones de la sociedad civil, a miembros de comunidades expuestas a riesgo y también a los gobiernos locales, a las autoridades locales, recogiendo sus perspectivas sobre algunos aspectos que tienen directa relación con la percepción de riesgo y su relación tanto con los objetivos de desarrollo sustentable como también como cuánto está afectando el cambio climático en sus contextos concretos. Hoy día tenemos una aproximación que tiene 3 pasos: recogemos los datos, reflexionamos, tenemos instancias de reflexión, tanto en las comunidades como con el gobierno local y también en términos de multiactores, cómo podemos colaborar en el territorio local y también generamos acciones. O sea, cuáles son los compromisos que cada uno de los actores pueden tomar de los resultados de visión de primera línea hoy día para poder generar un cambio real y reducir los riesgos de desastre. ¿Cuáles son las preguntas? Aquí puse algunas de las preguntas. ¿Cuáles son las amenazas que usted identifica en su territorio, que ustedes están viviendo? ¿Cuáles son las necesidades para reducir los riesgos? ¿Qué barreras experimentan ustedes para esta reducción de riesgo? ¿Ha habido aumento o pérdida o pérdidas en el ámbito del impacto de los desastres? En fin, son varias las preguntas y se han construido en relación a tratar de priorizar las amenazas, de descubrir cuáles son las barreras para la reducción de riesgo en el ámbito local, las tendencias en las pérdidas por desastres, los niveles de inclusión de las comunidades y de los grupos más vulnerables en la gobernanza local del riesgo y también en el ámbito de la integración de la reducción de riesgo climático de riesgo de desastre con cambio climático y desarrollo sustentable. Esta es una herramienta, creemos nosotros, que puede ser muy útil para los gobiernos. Y nosotros también entregamos, es una herramienta de acceso muy fácil, es una herramienta que tiene una rigurosidad también en el diseño, o sea, su muestra está diseñada de acuerdo a la lógica de cómo se construye la investigación y responde a todas las demandas técnicas necesarias para validar la información. De manera que yo hago un llamado a los estados que quieran tomar esta metodología y aplicarla. Es una metodología que se entrega gratuitamente, que está abierta, que nosotros capacitamos, que se puede, como digo, validar y de fácil acceso y que les voy a mostrar ahora más o menos cómo se está viendo. Y les quiero contar que estas imágenes no las vamos a poder mostrar en tiempo real, pero que en el boot 24 ustedes pueden ver en tiempo real cómo está entrando la información y qué están respondiendo en las comunidades hoy día. Así se ve. Ahí están las amenazas que identifican, se pueden seleccionar las regiones, los países, las comunidades. Se tiene información desagregada por género, por edad, por discapacidad y también otros temas. También ustedes pueden ver cuáles son las consecuencias para las comunidades en riesgo, específicamente en el territorio que se aplica, que tienen en términos de los diferentes ámbitos que se ven afectados, cuáles son las acciones que las comunidades consideran que son necesarias de implementar y también las barreras que ellos experimentan cuando quieren implementar o quieren abogar para la implementación de esas acciones. Acá tenemos otra imagen que nos puede dar otra información que también nos entrega que tiene que ver con más específicamente ya y en detalle acerca de las consecuencias, las acciones y barreras. Y acá tenemos ya otra información que son más específicas respecto de algunas preguntas que se hacen en la encuesta. Pero esto no solamente es una encuesta, también tiene grupos focales con grupos en situación de vulnerabilidad. También tiene grupos focales con los gobiernos locales y también tiene grupos focales multiactores. De manera que yo diría que hay algunas palabras que se han mencionado en esta mesa y que son claves para seguir avanzando de manera sustancial en la implementación del marco de Sendai. He notado algunas. Se ha hablado de coordinación. La necesidad de romper los hilos significa también mayor coordinación, y nosotros creemos y estamos seguros que la colaboración debe ser trabajada. Nosotros no, como GNDR, trabajamos por mayor colaboración. No creemos que también la colaboración es espontánea. Y por eso que también tenemos capacitaciones para producir mayor colaboración. Porque la colaboración también tiene que ver con un cambio en la voluntad, con un cambio también en abrirnos nosotros a otros y estar trabajando una colaboración de manera más generosa. Porque la colaboración no es juntarse entre varios a conversar, sino que es juntarse a poner a disposición algo que yo tengo para resolver un problema. Y entonces nosotros venimos aquí con esa voluntad, con la voluntad de colaborar, con este capital que les presento acá y que les puedo decir que pueden ustedes confiar en que nosotros hemos hecho este trabajo con la confianza que nos tienen las comunidades, con el valor y la fuerza y compromiso que tienen los cientos de organizaciones de la sociedad civil que están involucradas implementando visión de primera línea en distintas comunidades en el mundo. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Maria and Veronica. What a fabulous tool, and what great leadership from civil society in offering this tool. At this point, we are going to turn to a responder from the floor, Mr. Ivan Baras, who is the head of international cooperation from the Ministry of Interior in Serbia, and he will be providing a quick intervention regarding the national strategy in Serbia. Mr. Baras?
Hello. Okay, dear Mr. Wood, dear colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to address the session and the shared experience of the Republic of Serbia and the implementation of the Sendai framework for action. Following the discussion of the panelists, I would like to share with you that there is a full commitment of implementation of Sendai framework for DRR in Republic of Serbia. Since 2015, many things can be done to establish the legal framework for the systematic and holistic implementation of Sendai recommendations. And following the adoption of the National Disaster Risk Management Program in 2015, that set up a roadmap to mainstream the DRR into the national policies, Serbian National Parliament adopted the law on disaster risk reduction and emergency management in 2018 that will fully cover activities in the field, and it's fully aligned with the Sendai framework for DRI and other relevant documents in this field. Furthermore, the law set as the new outline in the area of risk prevention and risk reduction. It will address all significant activities in the implementation of Sendai framework as well as Sendai monitor process. In order to additionally complement the commitment to manage risk and not only emergency and disasters, Serbia has adopted a comprehensive and multi-hazard national risk assessment that will be followed by the National Emergency Plan covering all 11 identified risk in the Republic of Serbia. And in order to more have systematic information on disaster and understand the effect of the communities, Republic of Serbia has created a disaster loss database to create a national disaster inventory for analyzing disaster trends. And establish this inventory base is undergoing the process of aligning with recommendations of Sendai framework and holds the data from 1980s. Additionally, the new law defines the new develop of national DRR strategy, but as well as DRR plan, and establish fully functional risk register open for public. All those activities are now in the process of design and establishing. And therefore, the commitment to mainstreaming the DRR policies in the Republic of Serbia recognized in the new framework of legal, and will serve the sound base to support prevention and improving resilience measures and the lead from emergency to disaster management to risk management and risk reduction, and therefore ensure the sustainable developments in the future. On the other hand, having in mind the importance of international cooperation, Republic of Serbia is fully commitment to foreseeing the regional approach in those activities, especially in the field of disaster risk reduction in Southeast Europe through the regional cooperation initiatives. And to conclude, we need to learn from experience and to share the knowledge with other countries in order to build more resilient society. We need to work together. One more concrete action to reduce risk vulnerability, to implement and improve early warning system with a focus on raising public awareness and education of disasters. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your responding. We're now going to go to our questions, and if folks have entered questions into the app, those will be coming to Tim, who will then share them with us. I will begin, and we'll also give some folks an opportunity in the room to make sure that we have equal opportunity. I'm going to start with the first question for Ricardo, which is, and this came through the app, what is the rationale behind reporting on disability disaggregated data optional? What are the challenges to making reporting on disability obligatory?
As you all know, the Sendai framework is a framework that was adopted for voluntary implementation by member states, so it is not obligatory. It is not obligatory also the reporting on any of the specific indicators or the level of disaggregation of data. Of course, the Sendai framework and the technical guidance notes on the targets and indicators of the Sendai framework strongly encourage and invite member states to report on disaggregated data, because otherwise it is impossible to understand the level of vulnerability of the different groups of population. So this is something that we encourage strongly, but we cannot make it as a mandatory requirement to member states.
Thank you very much. Our next question is for Martha. Can you share a few examples of your most impactful partnerships?
Well, we have a lot of impactful partnerships. One of the most important ones is the ones that we have done for building resilient communities. We have a private, public-private social partnership, including universities, for example, to develop urban resilient communities in Mexico. We have at this point, more than 35 organizations working around that project. We included the local government, the state government, the national government. We included other companies, the universities around, NGOs which operate locally. We develop grassroots organizations within the community. We included the schools within that community, and we developed committees within the community. So we at this point are working into a very complicated network of partnerships in that specific example. But it's something that it has proven really very impactful. We divided that into 8 topics: economic, environmental, urban, social, and each of the committees have their own agenda and their own leadership. We let the leadership that is taken from and within the community itself, and we are part of the different committees. So I guess this is one of the most replicable programs that we have right now. We work with that specific model in around 50 communities around Mexico, and the acceleration of the results and the impacts has been proven very efficient.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take a question from the audience. I see lots of hands. I'm going to go way to the back. I believe we have a question in the very back. And then I'm going to another app question, and then I'll come back to the audience. Let's get a microphone to the questioner.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Masi.
Please hold the mic closer, Seta.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Masi. This question is for Ricardo, and also the representative from.
One minute. The interpreters are not hearing.
Okay. Okay. I want to ask this question around the disaggregation of the data that was raised by the representative from, I think, from Arab state, saying that that the disaggregation of data is problematic because there's no data. When it comes to disaggregation, where we find that that because that is optional, not mandatory, as Ricardo has pointed out, that what is the option here for our governments to do what it is supposed to do, to include us persons with disabilities in that data? So we find that being not mandatory, it becomes an option for government not to do it. And when they want to do it, they're saying it's difficult. So what is that there then, the support that can be given to governments that can ease the burden, if they're calling it a burden, of counting people with disabilities, disaggregation of data, so that we are part of the process? Thank you.
Seta, that question was for Ricardo?
Yes.
Well, actually, I think that I shouldn't be the one responding, because this is an issue that pertains to states. And you know that there is even international conventions on the rights of persons with disabilities that states have signed and that need to abide to. And this includes also, of course, the issue of providing sufficient data on persons with disabilities in each one of the countries. So from the international organization perspective, having gone through an intergovernmental process where governments have made a decision on the issue of disaggregation of data, what we can do is still strongly suggest and recommend, but at the end of the day, it is national governments that have to make a decision on how they handle this type of data. So I'm not eluding your question, but I'm actually pointing to the states' representatives who should be answering that question.
So here is a state's representative answering that question. So I think I am Kamal Kishore. I'm a member of the National Disaster Management Authority of India. I think while collecting data on disasters, disaster impact, disaster risk, having a specific focus to take into account persons with a disability is no longer a choice. In India, in 2016, we had a national law, Rights of Persons with Disability Act 2016, which is a broader law. It's not just for disaster risk management. And flowing from that, my organization, National Disaster Management Authority, has put out national guidelines for the disaster risk reduction for persons with disability. What are our obligations? What are the obligations of states, local authorities, and so on? They were on our website recently for public consultation. We got a lot of comments. So very shortly we will have a final national guideline on that. So I think I can't say that we are doing everything we can right now, but we seem to be moving in that direction very swiftly.
Also, as a representative of the Egyptian government, I would like to add that when I raised the issue of disaggregation options and its difficulty, I was talking about the baseline data, because most of baseline data, maybe before 2015, you don't have the required completed records of all data that you need to report on Sendai monitoring. So disaggregation options, not only for disabilities, also for age, sex, and other disaggregation options. Maybe for the baseline, it is a complex problem, but when we worked on developing our national system for emergency management and disaster loss assessment, we tried to include all these options for disaggregation. So when I raised this issue, I was talking about the baseline data. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question was very popular on the app, and it's for Ricardo. Is the quality of data solid enough to compare them between countries and draw conclusions? This has a further impact on the willingness by the private sector, in particular insurance, to report solid data, but only if the comparison is done over years within the same country.
I would say yes, as long as countries report on the Sendai Framework Monitor the indicators that were selected for each one of the global targets are actually universally comparable. And the minimum data requirements and the, in general, the technical guidance notes on how to manage the data and the computational methodologies are the same for all countries. This means that, yes, all the data based on the 38 indicators of the 7 global targets is globally comparable. Now, we haven't discussed much about it, but I just introduced this at the end of this very nice panel. countries have also the possibility of reporting on what we call the nationally determined or custom indicators that are more linked or associated with the national disaster risk reduction strategies as a means for monitoring the implementation of those strategies. But those, again, are open for selection by member states based on the context, the reality, and the circumstances that they have. Therefore, in those cases, those are not globally comparable. As a matter of fact, governments can create their own. So, for the global targets and indicators, yes, but not for the custom targets and indicators.
Thank you. I'm going to take a question from way back in the audience. We need to make sure that we get you a microphone.
Fighting.
Oh.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm Fana from Indonesia. I would like to address my question to the governments of India, representing India and Egypt. I wonder if you have the inclusion of gender issue and the protection of women and children into your regulations, international regulation, because we know that women, for example, is not just vulnerability, but they have specific needs that have to be protected. Sometimes, as many times, like disasters in Poso, we found, for example, there is sexual abuse and stuff like that. So we have to put into, we are thinking into put into the regulation, a special regulation for the national, regulation type of things. Thank you so much.
Yes, the gender issues are well integrated in all our disaster risk management work. Whether it is perfect, I don't think I could claim that. But over a period of time, we have done innovative things, small changes which are having big effects. Of course, we've had some discussion on the Odisha cyclone, so how the evacuation takes place, how the multi-purpose cyclone shelters are managed, all of that have to address gender concerns as well. In the context of recovery, some years ago, we started a process that whenever government provides assistance for rebuilding houses, the house title is in the name of the man and woman jointly. And once it is done, you do it once, then it is a precedent and you have to do it forever. So, and that, it sounds like a small change, but actually it has huge implications for the future, and it has had a very transformative effect.
Thank you. And if you would please pass the mic. Oh, do we have another person wanting to respond?
Excuse me. Yes.
Mohammed?
Yes, we also in Egypt, we are integrating the gender issues in the disaster risk reduction considerations. I would like to mention one of the raising awareness programs in Egypt is called the Countryside Pioneers, in Arabic, the Ra'idat Rifiyat. This program is targeting the countryside and village women in vulnerable areas, as they are one of the most vulnerable groups in case of disasters. This program is targeting the how to act in case of emergencies, and also how to maintain their livelihoods of the women in these countryside areas.
Thank you. I'm going to take one more question from the audience, and then it's going to be time to wrap up with some final comments.
This is Abdul on Security DRR network. I have actually two questions. The first one has already been raised and answered by Kamal. My second question is to Maria from DRR. In the DFL approach, you have mentioned about gender equalities throughout the report. Can you hear? Should I repeat the question? Am I loud? Okay. So I actually had two questions. The first one has been answered by Kamal already. And the second question is to Maria. Now you can hear. Second question is to Maria about the BFL approach. You have mentioned gender equality throughout the data collection in BFL, but we couldn't see disability. So have you addressed the voices of persons with disabilities in this frontline report or not?
Gracias por la pregunta. En algún momento yo decía que en el diseño de la metodología, específicamente en la encuesta, en la desagregación de datos, se incluyen la desagregación por género, edad y por discapacidad. De manera que en esa herramienta ya está incorporada, pero al mismo tiempo tengo que agregar que en términos de grupos focales también se considera grupos focales con personas con discapacidad en las comunidades que se están encuestando. Al mismo tiempo, si las comunidades, por ejemplo, pertenecen a una determinada etnia o mayoritariamente su población pertenece a una etnia o minoritariamente, también hay grupos focales con pueblos indígenas. Es decir, trata de incorporar la diversidad de la comunidad y específicamente relacionada con los grupos en situación de vulnerabilidad. Trata también de recoger la percepción de cuáles son los avances, no solamente en la implementación del marco de Sendai, sino que también cómo son los avances específicamente respecto de los compromisos de los estados, que los estados han hecho respecto a convenciones específicas y que de alguna manera también